nothing but trouble. You better...
The beach scene that changed cinema forever almost didn't happen. From Here to Eternity wasn't just defying Hollywood rules, it was rewriting them in the sand. The military wanted it banned, the censors wanted it sanitized, and the studio nearly fired the man who saved it all before he even got the part. These are 20 weird facts about From Here to Eternity. And the bonus? A kiss that lasted 8 seconds but took 3 years to approve. Report for duty. This one's loaded. Frank Sinatra didn't audition for Maggio. He begged. By 1952, his career was in freefall. His voice was shot, his marriage was crumbling, and Columbia Records had dropped him like a bad note. He was washed up at 37, and everyone in Hollywood knew it. But when Sinatra read James Jones's novel, From Here to Eternity, he saw himself in Private Angelo Maggio, the scrappy, defiant soldier who refuses to break even when the system tries to destroy him. He wanted that role more than anything he'd ever wanted in his life. So he called Columbia Pictures President Harry Cohn. He wrote letters. He showed up at the studio unannounced. And when none of that worked, he made an offer that stunned everyone. He'd do it for $8,000, a fraction of what he used to command. Some stars would have called that desperation. Sinatra called it survival. Columbia still hesitated. They wanted a bigger name, someone bankable. But Sinatra refused to give up. He flew himself to Africa where the film's director, Fred Zinnemann, was shooting another picture, tracked him down on location, and made his pitch in person. No agent, no script. It's just raw belief that this role could save him. And it did. Sinatra won the Oscar, revived his career, and proved that sometimes the greatest comeback starts with the most desperate plea. Before Burt Lancaster was cast as Sergeant Worden, the role belonged to someone else entirely. Columbia Pictures wanted Aldo Ray, a rising star with military experience and the kind of tough guy authenticity that seemed perfect for a career soldier stationed in Hawaii. Ray was interested. The studio was ready. But then Fred Zinnemann saw something different. He didn't want authentic military bearing. He wanted tension, danger, a man barely holding his demons in check. Someone who looked like he could explode at any second but never would. That was Burt Lancaster. The problem? Lancaster wasn't interested. He'd read the script and thought the character was too one-dimensional, too much of a cliché. He turned it down flat, but producer Buddy Adler wouldn't let it go. He met with Lancaster personally, walked him through the vision, explained how this wasn't going to be another war movie. It was going to be a story about broken men trying to hold on to dignity in a system designed to crush them. Lancaster listened, he reconsidered, and then he said yes. What came next was one of the most iconic performances of the 1950s. A man consumed by duty and desire, caught between honor and passion, rigid and reckless all at once. Lancaster didn't just play Worden, he became him. And in doing so, he helped create a character so complex that actors would study him for decades. Sometimes the best casting decisions are the ones that almost never happen. That beach scene, the one where Lancaster and Deborah Kerr embrace in the surf as waves crash over them. It wasn't in the script, not originally. Director Fred Zinnemann knew he needed a moment to show the intensity of their affair, the way two people could lose themselves completely despite the consequences. But the censors were watching every move. The production code prohibited adultery from being shown in a positive or romantic light. Married women couldn't be depicted in extramarital relationships without suffering punishment. And physical passion? That was walking a tightrope over a very steep cliff. Zinnemann needed something that felt passionate but didn't cross the line. Something that would slip past the censors but ignite the screen. So, he and cinematographer Burnett Guffey scouted locations and found a quiet stretch of beach at Halona Cove in Hawaii. The plan was simple. Film it fast, keep it tasteful, and pray the censors didn't kill it in post. Lancaster and Kerr rehearsed the scene in private. No crew watching, no pressure, just two actors figuring out how to make an illicit romance look inevitable. When the cameras rolled, they committed fully. The waves came in harder than expected. The sand stuck to everything. And for 8 seconds, the screen burned with a passion so raw, it became the most famous kiss in cinema history. The censors debated for weeks. They demanded edits, discussed cuts, argued over morality. But in the end, they approved it. Why? Yeah, because Zinnemann had framed it perfectly, romantic enough to be unforgettable, restrained enough to survive the code. And cinema was never quite the same. Montgomery Clift almost walked away before filming even started. The studio wanted him for Private Robert E. Lee Prewitt, the principled boxer turned bugler who refuses to compromise even when it costs him everything. Clift had read the novel and loved the character, but there was a problem. He didn't think he could pull off the bugle playing. Clift was a method actor, obsessive about authenticity. If Prewitt was supposed to be an elite army bugler, then Clift needed to actually play the bugle at that level, not fake it, not mime it, actually do it. So he hired a professional bugler and started training months before production began. 6 hours a day, every day. Scales, marches, full pieces. His neighbors complained about the noise. His lips split and bled from the pressure. But he kept going because Clift didn't do anything halfway. By the time cameras rolled, he could play every note himself. And you can hear it in the film. Those aren't dubbed recordings, that's Montgomery Clift actually performing. But here's the twist. After all that work, the studio wanted to dub it anyway. They told him a professional musician would sound cleaner, more polished. Clift refused. He'd spent months learning this instrument, endured pain and frustration, and he wasn't going to let someone else take credit for it. He threatened to quit. The studio backed down. And what audiences heard was the real thing. An actor so committed to his craft that he'd rather bleed than fake it. Deborah Kerr wasn't supposed to be sexy. Her entire career had been built on playing refined, elegant, proper British women. Prim governesses, dignified wives. Characters who sipped tea and spoke in measured tones. That was her brand, her image, the reason studios hired her. So, when she was cast as Karen Holmes, the adulterous wife of a brutal military officer, people were shocked. Could Deborah Kerr, the epitome of respectability, play a woman consumed by loneliness and desire? The studio had doubts. Test audiences had doubts. Even Kerr herself wasn't sure. But Fred Zinnemann saw something underneath the propriety, a simmering frustration, a woman trapped by expectations, yearning for something real. And he was right. From the first scene, Kerr shattered her own image. She didn't play Karen as a villain or a victim. She played her as a woman drowning in a loveless marriage, reaching for anything that felt like life. The beach scene made her a sex symbol overnight. Critics called it a revelation. Audiences were stunned. And Kerr? She later said it was the most liberated she'd ever felt on screen. She'd spent years being perfect, polished, untouchable. And in one role, she became human. The Academy noticed. She earned an Oscar nomination. But more importantly, she proved that reinvention was possible, that an actor could break their own mold and emerge stronger. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is show the world who you've been hiding all along. The military hated the script. From day one, they wanted nothing to do with it. The Pentagon read James Jones's novel and saw a story that depicted officers as cruel, enlisted men as victims, and the pre-Pearl Harbor Army as a corrupt, soul-crushing machine. They refused to provide assistance. No equipment, no locations, no uniforms. Columbia Pictures tried to negotiate, offering script changes, promising to soften certain scenes, anything to get military cooperation. The Pentagon didn't budge, so the production had to improvise. They couldn't film at Schofield Barracks, the actual location where the story takes place, so they rented private land nearby and built their own barracks from scratch. They couldn't use real Army uniforms, so costume designers had to recreate them stitch by stitch, careful not to violate military insignia laws. They couldn't get military advisors, so they hired veterans willing to share their knowledge off the record. It was expensive, time-consuming, and risky. But it also gave Zinnemann complete creative control. Without the Pentagon looking over his shoulder, he could tell the story exactly as written. Unflinching, raw, and honest. The irony? When the film premiered, active duty soldiers loved it. They saw their own frustrations reflected on screen. The gap between the ideal and the reality of military life. And while the brass still hated it, the men in the trenches understood. Sometimes the most authentic military story is the one the military refuses to endorse. Donna Reed fought for her role like her career depended on it, because it did. She was known for playing wholesome girls next door, sweet wives, innocent daughters, characters who baked pies and smiled through every hardship. When she read for the part of Lorene, a prostitute working in a gentleman's club near the barracks, the studio laughed. Donna Reed? Playing a woman of the night? It was absurd. They wanted someone with edge, someone sultry and dangerous. Reed didn't care what they wanted. She saw something in Lorene that everyone else missed. A woman pretending to be tough while secretly yearning for respectability. Someone performing a role to survive while dreaming of escape. That was a character Reed understood on a deep level. She'd been performing Hollywood's version of who she should be for years. So, she pushed back. She screen tested without makeup, softened her voice, found the vulnerability underneath the cynicism. And slowly, reluctantly, the studio came around. Filming wasn't easy. The production code had strict rules about how prostitutes could be portrayed. They couldn't be glamorized. They had to express regret. Their storylines had to end in redemption or punishment. Zinnemann and Reed walked that line carefully, crafting a performance that felt honest without triggering the censors. Reed made Lorene human, flawed, hopeful, heartbreaking, and when Oscar night came, she won Best Supporting Actress, proving that sometimes the biggest risk is refusing to be what everyone expects. She never played another prostitute, but she also never went back to being just the girl next door. Ernest Borgnine was supposed to be likable. That was the plan. Before landing the role of Sergeant Fatso Judson, the sadistic stockade guard who torments Maggio, Borgnine had mostly played friendly characters, sailors, sidekicks, guys you'd want to grab a beer with. He had a round face, a gap-toothed smile, the kind of presence that made people feel comfortable. But Fred Zinnemann didn't want comfortable. He wanted menace. He needed someone who could terrify audiences while still feeling like a real person, not a cartoon villain. And somehow, he saw that potential in Borgnine. During the audition, Zinnemann asked Borgnine to play the scene where Judson beats Maggio in the stockade. Borgnine hesitated. He'd never played someone truly cruel before, but then he thought about every bully he'd ever encountered, every authority figure who'd abused their power, and he channeled all of that into the character. The audition was chilling. Zinnemann hired him on the spot. On set, Borgnine struggled. Between takes, he'd apologize to Frank Sinatra, uncomfortable with the violence he was simulating. Sinatra would laugh it off, tell him it was just acting, but Borgnine couldn't shake the feeling. He'd go home at night feeling dirty, like he'd crossed some invisible line. But that discomfort translated into one of the most terrifying performances of the era. Audiences hated Fatso Judson with a passion rarely directed at fictional characters. And Borgnine. He later said playing evil changed him as an actor, taught him the power of fully committing to darkness. It also typecast him for years, but he didn't mind. Because sometimes being unforgettable is worth being unlikable. The knife fight between Prewitt and Judson wasn't choreographed like a typical Hollywood brawl. No stunt coordinators, no carefully planned moves, no safety nets. Zinnemann wanted it real, desperate, ugly, terrifying. Montgomery Clift and Ernest Borgnine spent hours talking through the psychology. What would these characters actually do? How would fear change their movements? They mapped it out like a real confrontation, not a dance. Then they filmed it in near total darkness. Minimal lighting, handheld cameras, tight claustrophobic angles that put audiences in the middle of the violence. Clift insisted on doing his own stunts. One take, he actually cut himself on the prop knife. He kept going, blood mixing with sweat. When Zinnemann yelled cut, the crew stood in silence. They just witnessed something raw and real. Truth, it turns out, is more terrifying than any stunt. The film wrapped just months before the biggest recognition of the year, but nobody expected what happened next. From Here to Eternity earned 13 Academy Award nominations, a record at the time that tied it with Gone with the Wind and All About Eve. 13. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for both Lancaster and Clift. Best Actress for Deborah Kerr. Supporting wins for Sinatra and Reed. Screenplay, cinematography, sound, editing. Every major category, it was there. Oscar night, March 25th, 1954, became the eternity show. One by one, the film claimed its trophies, 8 wins total, including Best Picture. Frank Sinatra clutched his Oscar and wept. Donna Reed thanked the director, who'd believed in her. Fred Zinnemann, the quiet perfectionist, stood on that stage vindicated. The military had tried to stop it, the censors had tried to neuter it, the studio had doubted it, and there it stood. The most awarded film of the year, proof that risk and honesty could triumph over caution and compromise. But here's what nobody talks about. Montgomery Clift and Burt Lancaster both lost. They'd delivered career-defining performances, been nominated in the same category, and split the vote. The Oscar went to William Holden for Stalag 17. Both actors smiled graciously, shook hands, and never publicly complained. They knew they had cannibalized each other. 2 titans in one film, each brilliant, neither rewarded. It's the price of greatness. Sometimes the best performances don't win awards. They just change cinema forever. Columbia Pictures nearly destroyed the most famous scene in the movie before anyone saw it. After the beach scene was filmed, studio executives watched the dailies and panicked. They thought it was too sexual, too provocative, too risky for 1953 audiences. They wanted it cut entirely or reshot with the actors fully clothed, standing apart, maybe just holding hands. Fred Zinnemann refused. He told them the scene was the heart of the film, the visual representation of 2 people so desperate for connection, they'd risk everything. Without it, the entire relationship falls flat. The studio brought in censors for a second opinion. The production code administrators watched it frame by frame, measuring the length of the kiss, analyzing body positions, counting how many times the waves crashed over the couple. For 3 weeks, the scene's fate hung in balance. Telegrams flew between New York and Los Angeles. Lawyers debated. Some executives threatened to shelve the entire film if the scene stayed. Others argued it would make the movie a sensation. Finally, a compromise emerged. The scene could stay, but only if Karen expresses remorse later in the film. Only if the affair clearly causes suffering. Only if audiences understood that adultery came with consequences. Zinnemann agreed to those terms because he'd already shot those scenes anyway. The beach moment survived, and when the film premiered, that 8-second kiss became the most talked about scene in cinema. Audiences gasped. Critics called it daring, and Columbia's box office receipts proved that sometimes the scenes executives fear most are the ones audiences remember forever. James Jones, the author of the original novel, hated what Hollywood did to his work. His book was raw, profane, unflinching, written from experience at Schofield Barracks itself. But the production code demanded changes. The profanity had to go. Violence got toned down. Characters had to show remorse. Worst of all, the ending changed. In Jones's novel, Prewitt's death feels meaningless, another casualty of a broken system. In the film, his death becomes almost heroic, a sacrifice that means something. Jones felt betrayed. He publicly criticized the adaptation, saying Hollywood had neutered his story. For years, he refused to watch it, walked out of screenings, dismissed it in interviews. Only decades later did he soften slightly, admitting the film was well made. But he never fully forgave the compromises, because for Jones, the book was truth, and truth once diluted becomes something else entirely. The stockade scenes were filmed in an actual military prison, not a set, not a recreation, a real functioning detention facility that the production rented for 2 weeks. The walls were concrete, the bars were iron, the cells still smelled of sweat and desperation. Fred Zinnemann wanted that authenticity, believed the environment would seep into the performances. He was right. Frank Sinatra later said, filming those scenes was the most emotionally draining experience of his career. Being locked in that cell, even knowing it was temporary, even knowing cameras were rolling, triggered something primal. The claustrophobia felt real. The powerlessness felt real. And when Ernest Borgnine would arrive as Fatso Judson to film the beating scenes, Sinatra's fear wasn't entirely acting. Between takes, the cast would need breaks to decompress. Some crew members couldn't handle being in that space for long periods and had to step outside. The lighting crew said, The shadows in those cells fell differently than on any set they had worked. Heavier, darker, like the walls themselves absorbed light. One night, after everyone had left, a security guard reported hearing sounds from the empty cells. Footsteps, metal scraping. Nothing they could explain. They never figured out what caused it. The production wrapped those scenes as quickly as possible and returned the facility to the military. But everyone who filmed there said the same thing. Some places hold on to suffering, and that prison, real and raw, gave those scenes a weight no Hollywood set ever could have matched. Deborah Kerr couldn't swim. Not well anyway. A few basic strokes in a pool, nothing more. Certainly nothing that would prepare her for ocean waves crashing over her head while trying to maintain a passionate embrace with Burt Lancaster. When Zinnemann explained what he wanted for the beach scene, Kerr nodded professionally and privately panicked. The ocean terrified her. She'd nearly drowned as a child and avoided deep water whenever possible. But she didn't tell anyone. Not the director, not Lancaster, not even her husband. She just showed up to the beach that morning, walked into the surf, and hoped her fear wouldn't show on camera. The first wave knocked her completely off balance. She went under, swallowed salt water, came up gasping. Lancaster grabbed her, thinking it was part of the scene. Zinnemann yelled cut, asked if she was okay. Kerr lied, said she was fine. Let's go again. They did 14 takes. 14 times, the waves crashed over her. 14 times, she fought the urge to panic and run back to shore. Her eyes stung from the salt. Her lungs burned. Sand scraped her skin raw. But she never broke character, never stopped kissing Lancaster. Never let the camera see anything but passion. Only years later did she admit how terrified she'd been. How every wave felt like it might pull her under and never let go. That scene that looked so effortless, so natural. It was an actress conquering her deepest fear 8 seconds at a time. The film's most iconic line almost didn't make it past the censors. When Maio, dying in Prewitt's arms, whispers his final words, he's supposed to deliver a defiant middle finger to the system that killed him. In the novel, his last words are profane, bitter, unrepentant. But the production code wouldn't allow profanity, especially not from a dying character. So, screenwriter Daniel Teradash had to find another way to capture that same spirit of defiance without using forbidden language. He wrote and rewrote the line dozens of times, trying to find something that felt true to the character while satisfying the censors. Frank Sinatra hated every version. Too soft, too clean, too Hollywood. He wanted something with teeth. Finally, Teradash found it, a line that captured Maggio's spirit without crossing the code's boundaries. When they filmed the scene, Sinatra delivered it with such raw emotion that grown crew members turned away crying. Zinnemann called it the most powerful moment in the film. The censors approved it, and audiences, hearing that final defiant whisper, understood exactly what Maggio meant, even if the words weren't explicit. Sometimes the constraints force you to dig deeper, to find emotional truth that transcends language. And sometimes what you can't say directly lands harder than anything you could have shouted. Montgomery Clift's perfectionism nearly shut down production. He was famous for demanding endless takes, questioning every line, refusing to move forward until a scene felt absolutely right. Also, from Here to Eternity, that perfectionism reached new heights. One scene, a simple dialogue exchange between Prewitt and Lorene, took an entire day to film. 27 takes. Clift felt something was off. Couldn't articulate what, just knew it wasn't right. Donna Reed stood patiently through every repetition, never complaining, never breaking. But the crew was furious. Every hour of overtime was blowing the budget. Other actors were being kept waiting. The production schedule was falling apart. Finally, Zinnemann pulled Clift aside, asked what was wrong. Clift couldn't explain it. He just felt the character wouldn't say the line that way, wouldn't react that way, wouldn't exist that way in that moment. Zinnemann made a decision. He rewrote the scene on the spot, changed the blocking, gave Clift something different to work with. They shot it once more. Take 28. Perfect. Clift smiled for the first time all day. The crew breathed a sigh of relief. And when audiences watched that scene, they never knew about the struggle behind it, never sensed the hours of frustration. They just saw two characters connecting with absolute authenticity. Because that's what Clift's perfectionism bought. Moments so real, they didn't feel like acting at all. But the cost was high, paid in time, patience, and the sanity of everyone around him. Pearl Harbor had to be recreated with smoke and mirrors. The film's climax shows the Japanese attack, chaos, and destruction that transforms everything. But Columbia couldn't get permission to film at the actual Pearl Harbor. The military's refusal to cooperate extended to all their facilities. So, the production team got creative. They used stock footage from military archives, newsreel material from 1941, anything they could legally acquire. Then they built miniature ships, filmed explosions on a California soundstage, crafted forced perspective shots. The effects team worked for months. Fred Zinnemann supervised every detail, insisting that what they showed had to feel true. The result? A Pearl Harbor sequence that worked not because of spectacle, but because of reaction. The camera focused on characters' faces as they witnessed destruction, on Prewitt dying in the chaos, on survivors stumbling through smoke and confusion. The attack became real through human response to horror. Audiences in 1953 remember December 7th vividly. Many had lost loved ones. They didn't need elaborate effects. They just needed truth reflected in faces. And that's what the film gave them. Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr never rehearsed the beach scene together, not once. Zinnemann felt that if they practiced it too much, it would lose spontaneity, become mechanical. He wanted their first real kiss to happen on camera, with waves and sand and uncertainty. Lancaster thought it was insane. How could they pull off the most important scene in the film without rehearsing? But Kerr understood Zinnemann's logic. She trusted that if they just committed in the moment, something real would emerge. So the first time they kissed, the cameras were rolling, the waves were crashing, the crew was watching. There was no safety net, no practice run, no second chance to get it right. They just did it. Lancaster pulled her close. Kerr responded. The ocean surged over them, and for 8 seconds, two actors became two people desperate for connection. When Zinnemann called cut, nobody moved. The crew stood frozen, sensing they'd just witnessed something unrepeatable. Lancaster and Kerr looked at each other, both a little shaken, both knowing they'd never be able to recreate that exact moment even if they tried. That's what made it perfect. The uncertainty, the risk, the total commitment to the unknown. You can't fake that. You can only survive it and hope the cameras caught everything. The film almost killed Frank Sinatra's comeback before it started. After he was cast, the press turned vicious. Columnists called it charity casting, said he was washed up, predicted he'd embarrass himself. Hedda Hopper wrote that Columbia would regret hiring him. Even some cast members had doubts. Could this broken-down crooner really pull off one of the most demanding dramatic roles in the script? Sinatra knew what people were thinking. Every day on set, he felt the weight of expectation and doubt. So, he worked harder than he'd ever worked. He showed up early, stayed late, asked Zinnemann for extra direction. When they filmed the stockade scenes, he pushed himself past physical limits, let the emotional brutality of the character consume him. Between takes, he'd sit alone, staying in Maggio's headspace, refusing to break character. The crew started to notice. This wasn't just an actor trying to revive his career, this was an artist fighting for his life. And slowly, the doubts faded. By the time filming wrapped, everyone knew Sinatra had delivered something special. When the Oscar came, it felt like vindication, not just for him, but for everyone who'd taken a chance on a has-been singer. The comeback wasn't just about winning an award. It was about proving that talent doesn't expire. It just waits for the right role to remind the world what it always was. From Here to Eternity changed the war film genre forever, but not in the way anyone expected. Most war movies of the era focused on heroism, sacrifice, the nobility of service. This one focused on the opposite, the petty cruelties, the institutional failures, the men broken by the very system meant to protect them. It said that sometimes the enemy isn't across the ocean. Sometimes it's in the barracks, wearing the same uniform, calling itself leadership. That message made people uncomfortable. The military hated it. Conservative critics called it unpatriotic. But audiences saw something true in it. Soldiers who'd served recognized themselves in these characters. Families who'd lost loved ones saw the reality behind the propaganda, and slowly, the war film evolved. Future movies couldn't ignore what From Here to Eternity had revealed. That complexity, moral ambiguity, and institutional critique could coexist with patriotism. That you could love your country while criticizing its failures. That the men who served deserve stories as complicated as their actual experiences. It opened a door that films like The Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, and Full Metal Jacket would walk through decades later, all because one director refused to make war look clean, and one studio, despite everything, let him show the truth. Those waves crashing over Lancaster and Kerr in the beach scene, they weren't planned. Zinnemann had scouted the location carefully, chosen a time when the ocean was supposed to be calm, perfect for filming a romantic moment without complications. But the day of the shoot, the tide came in stronger than predicted. Waves that should have been gentle swells became forceful breakers. The production team debated postponing, waiting for better conditions. But Zinnemann watched the water and saw something better than calm. He saw passion. He saw chaos. He saw two people so consumed by desire, they didn't even notice the ocean trying to drown them. So he told Lancaster and Kerr to ignore the waves, to stay committed to each other no matter what nature threw at them. And that's what they did. Every wave that crashes over them, soaking them, nearly pulling them apart, that's real. Unplanned, the ocean literally trying to interrupt their moment while they refuse to let go. That's why the scene works. It's not about perfect conditions or careful choreography. It's about two people clinging to each other while the world conspires to tear them apart, just like the story itself.